guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA Hates the Sound of Freedom. I live in a township, so in Ohio, that means I can hunt and shoot on my own property. I also live next to a HOA but not in it. I also have some crazy neighbors who seem to think that my property is their property. Example, I live on 2.5 acres, and I would probably say 70% of it is wooded with a large amount of 100 to 150 plus year old trees. I had just moved in back in March, and one of the first things I did was walk around the property and locate and remark all of my property stakes to know exactly what was mine. And I also marked all of the standing trees that were dead and needed to be cut down. And then a police car shows up because one of my crazy neighbors that I have caught multiple times trespassing on my property, thinks that my trees are apparently her trees and didn't want me cutting down the dead ones. So, on 4th of July week this year, bunch of guys from work asked me if I wanted to go shooting at a local outdoor range. When I asked what range it was, I told them no, why don't all of you just come over my house and we can shoot for free and not have to drive for an hour to a crappy range? And they asked, well, what about my neighbors? And I said, F them, that's exactly why I bought this property, to do what the hell I want. So I posted on the local neighborhoods group to give everybody a heads up if they hear a bunch of gunfire on that Friday afternoon, there's no need to freak out, I was just using my range with some friends. And of course that's when the fun started. There was a good mix of people saying great, wish they could come, and then a bunch of the HOA busybodies complaining that, I can't do that and that the noise would be offensive and they have rules against that, and so on. Now flash forward to the Thursday before, and I'm out in the yard setting up all of my steel plate targets on my 100-yard range, when I see a police car pull in the driveway again. So the sergeant says, you can probably guess why I'm here, laughing. And I said, yeah, I probably have a good idea. He says, I just want to start off saying you're 100% right and you can shoot and hunt on your own property and it's not a problem, but since we had a bunch of calls I wanted to stop out here and talk with you, that way we don't have to bother you at all during your shoot tomorrow. Lol. He says, he just wanted to stop out, introduce himself, meet me and take a look at the range real quick, and everything looked great. So this way come Friday, if they get a bunch of calls into dispatch, they won't have to send anybody out and they can just let everybody know on the phone call that everything's legal. So Friday comes along and about 6 guys from work show up and we went through probably 1,000 plus rounds in a couple hours, from 22s all the way up to my 50 BMG I let them play with. 2 of the guys brought guns with binary triggers, so we were doing some 30-round mag dumps for fun as well. Later that night I go back on the website to see what the posts were like, starting off with, sounds like the party started. Along with people whining and bitching that they called the police and were told that everything was legal and there was nothing for them to do, and commented with, well, I guess the police won't do anything until somebody shot. Lol. Yes, that's right. Newsflash, the police don't arrest you for pre-crime. That would be like them pulling you over for speeding before you've left your driveway because you might speed down the road. The next story is titled, I guess the trees and flowers are free. First come takes all. My apartment complex boasts some wonderful curb appeal. There are hibiscus and lilies, palm trees, orange trees, and a number of tropical plants spread generously across the property. There is a lush lawn that spreads the length of the property between buildings and ends in a courtyard with a swimming pool and picnic areas. I maintain the clubhouse next to the pool, which is in general a low-key job. However, watching the entitled patrons of this complex can be eye-opening at times. I can only watch and clean up the messes afterward, as I have been told in no uncertain terms that I am not a rule enforcer, and I should simply email my bosses of the incidents and go about my work. For months, expensive flowers called birds of paradise, due to their blooms resembling the head of a peacock, have been disappearing at night. First in front of the pool, then all around the clubhouse. Smaller white flowers were also cut off at the stalk. While I have reported these incidents through emails, as requested, nothing seems to have come of it. No nighttime presence of courtesy patrol, and no replanting of the lost blooms. So the result is a lot of greenery around the clubhouse and courtyard area with an absence of the original flowers. This weekend I think I stumbled across the culprit. About 8 p.m. Saturday night, hours after the maintenance teams and my bosses had gone home, I saw a man in beach attire and sandals clumsily wielding a tree trimming device and chopping off low-hanging limbs of a palm tree in the courtyard. I immediately called our courtesy patrol, but they did not send anyone for an hour and 15 minutes, and by then the man was gone. I emailed my bosses about the incident, and was told that I should never call courtesy patrol myself. That I should always just email one of the head office personnel regardless of the hour. I work until 10:30 p.m. on weekends, and they will decide whether to call the courtesy patrol. Fine. Sunday night at 8 p.m. I see the same guy with his tree trimmer whacking off pieces of a palm tree in the courtyard. So I approach him and ask what company he works for. When he replies that he doesn't work for any company and that he is just doing this on his own, I ask if he got permission from the leasing office. He then says that he doesn't need permission, because it doesn't hurt anything and he makes artwork to sell from the foliage that he cuts off. Then he proceeds to fill a trash can at the picnic site with the tree parts that he doesn't want. I sent one more email to my bosses and emptied the trash can into the dumpster. The next story is titled, "The All-Important Family Name." I'm currently bored to my back teeth, so I thought I would come share some stories with the good people of Reddit for a little cathartic entertainment. All names are made up. I'm Australian, so if a word or phrase sounds strange, that's probably the reason. Also, I suck at grammar and use way too many commas. But I'm too old to try and turn back the clock on that one. My family is super fucked up, in a lot of ways. Not just one side of the family either. I'm lucky enough that every single facet of my family is their own special kind of fucked up. Myself included. You don't make it through that gauntlet without a myriad of emotional scars and a few idiosyncrasies. So I thought I'd get started by telling the story of the family name. You see, my paternal grandparents, Nan and Pop, were strangely obsessed with passing on the family name. I never understood why, never bothered to ask because I simply didn't care. I never met Pop's side of the family, so it's possible they all had a similar obsession. But in this day and age, succession and lineage, in a dirt-poor family with no assets, from a shitty suburb of a shitty third-tier city in Australia, does not matter. My paternal grandparents had 3 children, male, female, male. Both of their sons met and married women with a previous bastard child, their words, not mine, and we, myself and Emma, were always treated as less than, because we didn't carry the family name. We were both tolerated to exist in the family, never truly a part of it. Our mums were also treated poorly because they had dared to burden the family with unwanted, invalid children. Their daughter was the first to produce legitimate grandchildren. And for that reason they were favored, but they didn't carry the family name, so while they always held some favor, they lost a lot when my brother, Landon, the oldest male grandchild to have the family name, was born. He was the golden grandchild. The ultimate. He was honored, venerated, practically worshipped. And it was extremely evident to all of us kids, even from a young age. Everything they did revolved around him. He was lavished with gifts, taken on holidays, pets were named after him, and birds were taught to say his name. I'm not even exaggerating. Dad. Technically stepdad, but to me he is dad. That's another family story for another time. Went on to have another 2 children, my brother, Daniel, and sister, Jasmine. Both were given his surname, but they too were less important. Not as invisible as Emma and I were as bastards, but they weren't the heir to the family name. Dad's brother later fathered 2 girls, so his branch of the family tree was now considered dead. Emma and I both had our surnames changed when our mums married our stepdads, which helped a little, but never very much. And even that vanished when Dad died. He and Mum had divorced about 2 years prior, and I was immediately ostracized quite literally the day he died. Nan called me, told me, Ray is dead. You need to tell his children. I'm too upset to call them. No hello. Didn't even check that I wasn't standing in the middle of Target when she dropped that bomb. I then wasn't allowed to participate in any funeral planning or stay with them after I drove 14 hours to see them before the funeral. Nor was I named among his children in the newspaper obituary. They tried to not allow me to even sit with my siblings at the front of the church during the service. But my golden child brother was so devastated he was physically clinging to me for support. So, they finally, begrudgingly, allowed it. During the service, and it was big, about 300 people. Half of that was Dad's family. Each of my siblings had been told they must get up and say something about Dad. But Landon just couldn't. He was sitting next to me, sobbing, when he was called up. He just looked at me and said, I can't. So, I read Landon's piece for him. Some of my maternal family had come with me for support that day. My auntie later told me that when I started walking up, one of Dad's aunts sitting near the back had said, "How dare she? She isn't even his child." My auntie leaned over and told her, "If you don't shut up, yours will be the next funeral we attend." I love my auntie. Afterward, my siblings saw how I was being treated, and how toxic the grandparents were. There was a lot more that happened, but word limits and all. One by one they went NC with the grandparents too. Landon was the first, only 12 months after Dad died. Jasmine a year after that. They kept in contact with Daniel for a few more years. He had always been treated well, and now that the golden grandchild had deserted them, he was more important to them. But even he went full NC 6 years later. So, they lost contact with both of their name-bearing grandsons. Now for the parts of the story that bring me glee. Because the family name will die with my generation. Mine and Jasmine's sons have their father's surnames, and Daniel met a woman with 2 teenage children a few years ago, and they are happy with their own names. They will not have any more children. Landon married a woman who already had 3 children. They had a daughter together, who was given her mother's surname, so that she has the same name as her siblings. The funniest suck you came from Emma. Her mum divorced herself out of the family before mine did. But like me, Emma stayed close with her dad and kept his surname even after she married her wife a few years ago. They have a son, and gave him the wife's surname, because, in Emma's words, "There's no way in hell I'm giving those witches anything that they want." Pop died 2 years ago, with no grandchildren bearing the family name. The next story is titled, "Camp in the Lobby? You won't get your room." I recently started my first job in a hotel as a receptionist. Before this, I've worked many hospitality jobs, but this is my first time in a hotel. So far, I've encountered all sorts of people, some annoying, some lovely, but these people today really pushed my buttons. The check-in time for our hotel is 3 p.m. When people arrive early, we tell them we cannot guarantee anything before that time. Today, that was especially true. We are dreadfully understaffed, most relevantly in housekeeping. This morning, we had 108 checkouts. Throw those together, along with entitled guests, and you have a disaster just waiting to happen. 3 different couples all arrived at 7 a.m., wanting to check into their room. I give them the whole spiel about not being able to guarantee them anything before 3 p.m. Not to mention, the room type they booked still have people in them. I offer to store their luggage, they accept, and go to have some coffee in a slightly miffed mood. This is fairly normal, and people are usually nice about it. 3 hours later, at 10 a.m., they return, asking for updates on their rooms. I tell them the same message, and offer some suggestions for what they can do in the city. I say I'll give them a call if their room is ready. All 6 of them decide this is too stressful, and decide to camp in the lobby. For 5 hours. Until 3 p.m. Obviously, they didn't think they would have to wait until 3 p.m. If they're there, obviously we can magically clean a room for them. Alas, this was not the case, as I had told them, thrice now. As the hours passed, they gave me dirty look after dirty look. I gave them updates. The terrible tango continued until 2 p.m., when one of them, a man, approached the front desk. I could tell from the look on his face that he was disappointed. What follows is a direct quote of the conversation we had. "I just wanted to say, we've traveled extensively, and would really appreciate a room." I tapped my fingers on the desk. "Yes, sir, I understand, but we don't currently have any rooms available, as I've told you before. I will check you in as soon as I have rooms ready for you. We've been traveling for 8 years, and usually hotels are able to put us in a room if we arrive early or change our assigned room. This has never happened before. Sir, I understand, and when we have any rooms available at all, you will be the first to know. You know, in a situation like this, you need to employ something called crisis management. It's called prioritizing those who come first." He then walks off, and all I can think is, you deciding to sit in the lobby is hardly a crisis. At 3 p.m., like I told him, their rooms were ready. I check them in without further incident, though they give me the stink eye the entire time. I'm clocking out by this point, so I leave and never want to think about them again. I know it's nothing major, but these entitled idiots got on my nerves so much I just had to share. Let us all rejoice that New Year's is nearly over. Edit. I feel I should clarify that all 6 of them were together, just in different rooms. All of them came to ask for updates every half an hour, which is okay in itself, I don't mind that. It was the way they talked down to me, gave me dirty looks whenever I did anything, and then how the man came up later. It wasn't just one couple. We genuinely didn't have any rooms ready, which is an anomaly for us. Usually we could check them in, but we were very understaffed. I wish I could magically make rooms ready, but I was in constant contact with the housekeepers trying to get updates for them, and trying to get them a room. It was just a bad day all around. The last story is titled, "When the group of 50 tourists only comes in to use the restrooms." This happened last month. I had my shift as a cashier at the museum where I sell both tickets and gifts. When visitors enter the museum, they have to walk across the lobby to me. Out of nowhere, a large group of ca. 50 people arrived. They were foreign tourists. Their guide, a direct elderly woman, came up to me and asked about the restrooms, so I showed her the way. Soon 2 lines formed in front of them. I thought that they just really needed to use the restrooms before entering the museum. That wasn't the case. The guide returned to me and revealed that they were actually on their way to the Christmas markets and only needed to use the restrooms. She was told somewhere that we have free toilets for everyone. We don't, albeit we sometimes semi-tolerate when non-visitors do this. They had no idea that there were the restrooms at the markets, or that their bus was actually parked right next to the large mall, which has free restrooms. I don't know how they could have missed it. Communication was a little difficult, as these tourists came from abroad. Luckily, their mother tongue was similar to the one used in this country. While I was talking to the guide, half of the tourists entered the first exhibition, which is on the ground floor. The only guy working in there was rightfully horrified, as always when a huge group arrives. At this point, I had to call the shift manager to sort things out. Using the restrooms is one thing, entering the exhibition without paying for the tickets is another. The guide apparently had no idea about this either and just kept repeating that this would never happen again. She sent most of the tourists outside, but some remained at the exhibition. I had to kick them out myself. They couldn't really understand me, so I think they mainly left because I sounded angry. Anyway, it finally worked and everyone from that group left the building. So yeah, this happened. The management knows about it, but I'm not sure whether they will do anything. Not that much can be done. 1 employee against 50 tourists and 1 guide who come without a warning to use our restrooms and then enter the exhibition without paying. Luckily, we didn't get a shitty Google review as a result. Thank you for listening.